Hello, in this video we will build representations of a waffle iron and sandwich press and use that as a means to recap the following features: extrudes, revolves, sweeps, and lofts. The hot plates for both the waffle iron and the sandwich press will be provided to you for your builds. So it's a good idea to be familiar with the dimensions, but of course you can change these dimensions to match your design. So jumping right in with extrudes, I have here as a master sketch simply the dimension of the griddle, but we probably want our press to be slightly larger, so I'm just going to select that outside chain, offset the entities about 0.3 inches, and this will be my master sketch. It's a good idea to build in halves whenever you're building something symmetric. It's just a little bit easier, it's less effort, so to speak. So I'm going to draw a straight line here. Make it coincident in the center. Less effort in that you sometimes, if you start to have details on one side, you don't have to do it once, you don't have to do it twice. And again, it's just a kind of a best practice, good habit to get into. So while I'm still in this sketch, I'm going to go ahead and load the extruded boss base command. So as I mentioned, this is a recap. The from is where the sketch starts. You have different direction options here. The default one is just sort of a blind direction. But if I want, I can also go use midplane and go in both directions, which is the option that I want now. I might make my sandwich press, let's see, maybe about 3 inches tall. And, just extruding a simple block at this point. Most sandwich presses, if you look at images, sometimes they reveal a bit of the iron plate. So eventually we want to split this into a top lid and a bottom lid with a bit of a gap in the middle for a plate. At this point, we would maybe add some refinement to this. Of course, you could cut curvature or what have you based on your design. We're just keeping it simple with a block for now. Just be aware that when you add fillets, the order in which you add them is important. So for example, if I start by filleting both of these edges and set this to be 0.5, and then I fillet the top here, you can see that the fillet runs around. It's because there's a tangent edge here, so it simply just travels around that edge and continues onto the front. If I take one of these and drag it so the order changes, you can see that the look and aesthetic changes. That's because now we've started with this edge fillet. So when we go in and add a vertical fillet on these vertical edges, it will turn this corner and run forwards. So you can see it changes the look based on the order in which the fillets are applied. So just be aware of that design detail. The order, matters. So just a suggestion of like some things that I've seen. Sometimes I'll see on some products a large fillet on the back here, and then large fillets on the front edges. And then a way to sort of, you now have a running edge that runs all around your object. You can also use chamfers. Chamfers are a little bit more fussy to deal with in SolidWorks. They're not quite as robust as fillets. But I feel like I see this sort of approach on like printers and paper shredders and such. So again, the main takeaway is that the fillet order does matter. So again, just to keep this simple from side view, I'm just going to sketch a line down the middle. I'll use an extrude cut here to just separate the top and the bottom. So extrude cut. I want to add a thin feature to it, and here I'm just going to go through all both, but I want to make sure that this thin feature is applied. I don't know why it's not showing me. There we go. And yeah, I want this thin feature to be mid-plane, so it's in the middle, and maybe we'll reveal about almost a ½ inch of the griddle, and I want to keep all of the bodies. Now, it's a very simple lid and base, nothing too complex. What I am going to do too is just cut a pocket into both of these bodies for the plate itself. So I'm just going to select this chain from the master sketch and just right here in the midplane. Again, it's good to be aware of the dimensions of the plate. I believe it's 0.4 inches tall, so if I make this cut 0.8, it will account for both the top and bottom plate. And now I have those pockets in there with a bit of a reveal for some realism. Again, I'm just keeping this design super simple. Some tight fillets on these corners. And I'll repeat it on the bottom. Since so far the top and bottom have been symmetric, I could have saved myself some time by just mirroring the top one down. So it would be yet another way to be even more efficient. And now finally I can just end this build by mirroring about the right plane and merging the solids. If I wanted to add more details, I could extrude some feet, maybe a hinge on the back, maybe a control panel for the knob, but this is just a rough overview recap, so just wanted to show that. Okay, moving on. Revolves. This will be very similar to building a bottle in SolidWorks. This is what the master sketch may look like. This kind of center detail, again, is planning ahead to trap the waffle iron plate. So I'm going to start by making a sketch on the front plane, take the master sketch and just convert entities on it. I'm just going to delete some of these extra sketches that we don't need. The bottom one is used, so some of the sketches that you only need part of, I'm going to use this trim tool, or T, and just start clicking on all of these extra edges. Be aware that sometimes there's these small edges that hang out beyond the arc and things like that. So that's an easy thing to miss in SolidWorks, is sometimes sketches have little tags on them. Sometimes you have like two lines on top of each other. So if you're ever having an error of an extrude or revolve, double check that you don't have lines or things on top of each other or little tags hanging off. So now we have two complete sketches. Let's see if I can demonstrate this double line issue here. Okay, no, it still shows up. I was wondering if it would, the highlighted sketch would disappear. Anyway, we have two closed sketches here. I'm going to go ahead and load the revolve feature. Now, while I loaded that from the sketch, so it knows that I want to revolve this sketch. It's asking me for the axis of revolution, so the center. I can simply just select this edge, full rotation here, and there we have basically a rough representation of a waffle iron. For sweeps, this might represent a master sketch for like a double waffle iron design. Here is the shape that we want to sweep. So I might start by making a right sketch and copying the right master sketch and just completing this into a closed shape. If I want some of these like scallop details here, I can simply just hit T for the trim tool and knock this out. And now I have sort of my sweep profile ready to go. So again, a sweep is made up from a profile and a path, sort of like a train that travels along the track. So now for my path, I'm going to make a top plane sketch, and I'm going to right click on this line and say select chain. It selects all these lines around, and click on convert entities. Now again though, I want to work in halves, so I'm just going to draw a sketch down the middle here and trim out these extra lines that I don't need. And I'm going to set this to be for construction. So now I sort of have this track here. So I'm going to load the sweep boss base command. For my profile, I'm going to select the shape that I made. And for the track, I want to make sure I don't accidentally select the master sketch. So I'm going to expand the tree here and select sketch 4, and then check this box. And now I have my swept edge along the side here. So this is good for sort of like complex edging or details around the side. I can fill this gap in the middle with a simple extrude and complete it with the same way that I showed in the first file. Lofting is perhaps the most complex way to build a body, but it allows for complex curvature and such. If you recall, a loft is basically a blend between two shapes. And so obviously there needs to be some space in between where those shapes exist. So the intent here in the master sketch, the top is sort of the profile from the top view. From the side here, this is intended to be the center of the lid, and this is the edge of the lid. So this arc is intended to be towards the outside of this profile. And in fact, it ends, this line here is defined by this point. It's just the way that it's set up, so that when it curves, it ends here. So there's a couple ways to approach this. One way would be to add a new plane out here and put this end sketch on it. So I could, as a recap of how to add a plane, you can go to Insert, Reference Geometry, and Plane. And the preferred method here is to select a sketch entity, either a line or a curve, and then an endpoint on that. And SOLIDWORKS will make it default to coincident onto that endpoint and perpendicular to whatever line or arc that you have. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it is with an extrude, which is the method I'm going to use here. So I'm going to create a new top plane sketch and select this chain and convert entities on that. I'll close off the sketch with a line here and start with an extrude. And this is just basically going to give us a base on which to build the lid. So I want the extrude to come up to the base of the lid. So I'm going to tell it to go up to vertex and select that point there. And I'm going to use the same setting here and choose this endpoint at the bottom and then check this box. Now it's worth mentioning that you can sketch on faces as long as they're flat. So I can create a sketch here. I can't create a sketch here because it's curved. So on this face, I'm going to create a sketch and pull over this part of the master sketch, like I mentioned, the end part of the lid, and just close it off into a complete shape. For the right plane, I'm going to create another sketch, and again, just pull this part of the lid. Alt-V hides all the sketches, V for view. And then I'm just going to complete this shape here and exit out. And now if I hide the master sketches by selecting them and clicking the eyeball, now and hit Alt-V, now we can see the two shapes we want to loft together. So I'm going to load the lofted boss base command, and for profiles, I'm going to select both of these shapes. Now this rough loft guide is very important. You can see it's going from the top back corner to the top, both top back corners, which is good. It's aligning our sketch properly. Sometimes if it's crossed or something, it can lead to issues later on. For guide curves, I want it to follow this front curve, but you can see when I select that, it also curves the back. So I want to select this back here and make sure that that stays straight. We can see here again our rough loft guide looks correct. Hopefully it stays that way. The next thing I want to mention is from this front view, you can see this is a straight line. Since we're modeling in halves, that's not ideal because when we mirror this, there's going to be a crease down the middle. So I want to change the start constraint and tell it to be normal to profile so that it starts coming out straight and arcs down. Earlier when I was planning this file out, I was getting an error here. And that was because that rough loft guide was going from a top corner to a bottom corner. So if you see that guide going crisscross, you can try and drag it to get it into the right position if you're trying to build with a loft. So there you have it. There's 4 different ways and approaches to start to build your griddle.